The concentrated answers for the most popular misconceptions about Islam Part 1. Preface. All praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the worlds, the one who sustains the heavens and earths, director of all that is created. Who sent the messengers, may the peace and blessings of Allah upon all of them, to rational beings, to guide them and explain the religious laws to them with clear proofs. I praise Him for all of His bounties. I ask Him to increase His grace and generosity. I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship except Allah alone, who has no partner, the One, the Generous, the Forgiving. I bear witness that our leader Muhammad is His servant and messenger, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. The other prophets and messengers, and the rest of the righteous. It is known to many people that there are many suspicions raised about Islam, including those developed by non-Muslims intentionally in order to distort the image of Islam in front of others. Some of which is caused by a misunderstanding of the Islamic law, and the other are the result of the lack of knowledge of the Islamic religion. Most of the people today who hear these suspicions and slanders against Islam, their source of receiving them is the non-Islamic media or persons who may be anti-Islam, or the suspicions transferred to them by people who are not aware of Islam. Thus, these erroneous informations transfer from person to person and from group to group, which led to its dramatical spread in Western societies especially, and the non-Muslims, in general. It's of the fairness that the person's judgment on others be taken of themselves, their writings, their constitution, or the approach that they put for themselves, whether they are religions, groups, institutions, associations, or even members. So it's also fair to judge the religion of Islam through its holy book, Quran, and Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, through clarification and statements of the followers of this religion themselves, not others. Therefore, it was important to arrange and compile a book that depends on its approach on Quran and the Sunnah, the commandments of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and collects the most common misconceptions on Islam, then reply in an easy and concentrated manner without boring, prolonging, or breach shortening. So the reader of this book can be able to judge fairly, and by himself, on this religion and its followers by themselves, not others, and from their book and teachings of their prophet. Fairness is the ethics of decence, the owners of the high intellect, the proper approach and common sense. I did this book at the request of the Administration of Islam Port website, for doing a book to respond to the most popular 20 misconceptions about Islam, with short answers, good selection of misconceptions, and with clear, correct and concise statements. I have been collecting this book on the basis of the selection of the most common and prevalent suspicions about Islam from several sources, books, and internet websites which focused on this matter before. This book is a compendium of information and reconcile of these sources, so that the answer to be clear, comprehensive and as short as possible. Due to time constraints, and the need for the book to serve the advocacy work, it was limited to 20 misconceptions only, a number that administration of the site has requested me to do. However, I had intended during the compiling of this book to make it comprehensive and contain most of the suspicions raised about Islam in future editions, God willing, so as the right seeker does not require to navigate between literatures. I will ask God to accept this work purely for His sake and reward whoever contributed in doing it, preparing it, lead people to it, and publishing it, and forgive him and his parents that he exalted listens and responds. Omar A. Al-Khalidi. Islam and Extremism. One Islam spread by sword. Many non-Muslims, when they think about Islam, they evoke the idea of Islam as a brutal religion that's spread by sword. This misconception can be easily removed by knowing that one of the most important principles of Islam is freedom of religion. The Quran says, "There is no compulsion, or coercion, in the religion, Islam. The right direction is distinctly clear from error." 2-256. In addition to this, Islam teaches that a person's faith must be pure and sincere, so it is certainly not something that can be forced on someone. The Quran says, "Then whosoever wills, let him believe, and whosoever wills, let him disbelieve." 1829. Mark Glynn, a Christian activist, says in Junk History, Christians and Muslims were not converted by the sword as is commonly taught and believed. Christians and Jews were allowed to keep and practice their religion within those areas where the Muslims had gained hegemony. Also, Islam decided the approach to spread Islam and to invite people to it in all places and all times in the Quranic verse. "Invite mankind, O Muhammad, to the way of your Lord, i.e. Islam, with wisdom, i.e. with the divine revelation and wisdom and Quran, and fair preaching." and argue with them in a way that is better. 16 to 125. It is a function of Islamic law to protect the privileged status of minorities, and this is why non-Muslim places of worship have flourished all over the Islamic world. History provides many examples of Muslim tolerance towards other faiths. When the Caliph Omar entered Jerusalem in the year 634, Islam granted freedom of worship to all religious communities in the city, proclaiming to the inhabitants that their lives and property were safe, and that their places of worship would never be taken from them. He asked the Christian patriarch Sophronius to accompany him on a visit to all the holy places. Islamic law also permits non-Muslim minorities to set up their own courts, which implement family laws drawn up by the minorities themselves. The life and property of all citizens in an Islamic state are considered sacred whether the person is Muslim or not. It should also be known that Muslims ruled Spain for roughly 800 years. The non-Muslims there were alive and flourishing. Additionally, Christians and Jewish minorities have survived in the Muslim lands of the Middle East for centuries. Countries such as Egypt, Morocco, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Jordan all have Christians and/or Jewish populations. If Islam taught that all people are supposed to be killed or forced to become Muslims, how did all these non-Muslims survive for so long in the middle of the Islamic Empire? It is also interesting to note that when the Mongols invaded and conquered large portions of Islamic Empire, instead of destroying the religion, they adopted it. This is a unique occurrence in history, the conquerors adopting the religion of the conquered. Since they were the victors, they certainly could not have been forced to become Muslims. Ask any of the over 1 billion Muslims alive in the world today whether they forced. The largest Muslim country in the world today is Indonesia, and there were never any battles fought there. So where was the sword? How could someone be forced to adhere to spiritually rewarding and demanding religion like Islam? To most Muslims are fundamentalists and terrorists. A fundamentalist is a person who follows and adheres to the fundamentals of the doctrine or theory he is following. For a person to be a good doctor, he should know, follow, and practice the fundamentals of medicine. In other words, he should be a fundamentalist in the field of medicine. For a person to be a good mathematician, he should know, follow, and practice the fundamentals of mathematics. He should be a fundamentalist in the field of mathematics. For a person to be a good scientist, he should know, follow, and practice the fundamentals of science. He should be a fundamentalist in the field of science. One cannot paint all fundamentalists with the same brush. One cannot categorize all fundamentalists as either good or bad. Such a categorization of any fundamentalist will depend upon the field or activity in which he is a fundamentalist. A fundamentalist robber or thief causes harm to society and is therefore undesirable. A fundamentalist doctor, on the other hand, benefits society and earns much respect. Islam has 5 meanings: surrender, submission, obedience, sincerity to Allah, and peace. In fact, Islam is derived from the word salam, which means peace. It is a religion of peace whose fundamentals teach its followers to maintain and promote peace throughout the world. Therefore, Islam is the religion of mercy and tolerance. It calls for justice and peace. It also protects the freedom and dignity of mankind. The Quran says, "And we have sent you, O Muhammad, not but as a mercy for the Alamin, mankind, jinn and all that exists." 21 to 107. 3. Jihad is the holy war against non-Muslims. While Islam in general is misunderstood in the Western world, perhaps no other Islamic term evokes such strong reactions as the word jihad. The term jihad has been much abused. The word jihad comes from the root word jihada, which means to struggle. So jihad is an act of struggling. There are many types of jihad, like jihad of someone to his own soul. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said that the greatest jihad is to struggle with the evil suggestions of one's own soul. Secondly, jihad by word for leading people to the righteousness, right guidance and good morals. Jihad by sword is jihad of those who oppress us, our community, and our country, to defend our religion, our lives, and property. This kind of jihad by sword is against Muslims and non-Muslims, an instinct in the human being and even in the animals. 4. Kafir. Kafir is derived from the word kufr, which means to conceal or to reject. In Islamic terminology, kafir means one who conceals or rejects the truth of Islam, and a person who rejects Islam is in English called a non-Muslim. If a non-Muslim considers being called a non-Muslim or kafir, which are one and the same, an abuse, it is due to his misunderstanding about Islam. He or she needs to reach out to proper sources of understanding Islam and Islamic terminology, and not only will he not feel abused but appreciate Islam in the proper perspective. A Muslim also has to do kufr, not with Allah but with all that is worshipped other than, or along with Allah. Whoever disbelieves in Taghut, Yakfur bi Taghути, and believes in Allah alone, then he has grasped the most trustworthy handhold that will never break. 2, 256. So a Muslim also has to do kufr, he has to be a kafir of Taghut. Taghut means all that is worshipped other than, or along with, Allah. If kafir was an insulting word, Allah would not have used it for Muslims. Also, lama kafir in your religion's terminology cause I reject your doctrine and I don't mind, but that doesn't mean I will not treat you well or I want to kill you, since Allah Exalted says in Quran, Allah doesn't forbid you to deal justly and kindly with those who fought not against you on account of religion nor drove you out of your homes. Verily, Allah loves those who deal with equity. 62-8. B. Islam and women. 1. Polygamy. A man can marry up to 4 wives. Polygamy is a very ancient practice found in many human societies. The Bible did not condemn polygamy. To the contrary, the Old Testament and rabbinic writings frequently attest to the legality of polygamy. King Solomon is said to have had 700 wives and 300 concubines, 1 Kings 11:3. Also, King David is said to have had many wives and concubines, 2 Samuel 5:13. The Old Testament does have some injunctions on how to distribute the property of a man among his sons from different wives, Deut. 22-7. As for the New Testament, according to Father Eugene Hillman in his insightful book, Polygamy Reconsidered, nowhere in the New Testament is there any explicit commandment that marriage should be monogamous or any explicit commandment forbidding polygamy. The monogamy that the Christians, the Hindus, and Jews practice today, is not from their religion, but from their government. So the issue of monogamy has no religious significance, it is a man-made rule. Monogamy is the result of an act of parliament, not their faith. Therefore, we can say that before the Quran was revealed, there was no upper limit for polygamy and many men had scores of wives, some even hundreds. Islam put an upper limit of 4 wives? Islam gives a man permission to marry 2, 3 or 4 women, only on the condition that he deals justly with them. Surah Nisa of the glorious Quran. Marry women of your choice, 2, or 3, or 4, but if ye fear that ye shall not be able to deal justly with them, then only 1, 4 to 3. In most human societies, females outnumber males. In the US there are, at least, 8 million more women than men. New York alone has 1 million more females as compared to the number of males, and of the male population of New York 1/3 are gays, i.e. sodomites. The USA as a whole has more than 25 million gays. This means that these people do not wish to marry women. Great Britain has 4 million more females as compared to males. Germany has 5 million more females as compared to males. Russia has 9 million more females than males. In Guinea there are 122 females for every 100 males. In Tanzania, there are 95.1 males per 100 females. God alone knows how many million more females there are in the whole world as compared to males. Thus, the only 2 options before a woman who cannot find a husband is to marry a married man or to become public property. Islam prefers giving women the honorable position by permitting the first option and disallowing the second. There are several reasons why Islam has permitted limited polygamy, but it is mainly to protect the modesty of women. It has to be added that polygamy in Islam is a matter of mutual consent. No one can force a woman to marry a married man. Besides, the wife has the right to stipulate that her husband must not marry any other woman as a second wife. Billy Graham, the eminent Christian evangelist, says, Christianity cannot compromise on the question of polygamy. If present-day Christianity cannot do so, it is to its own detriment. Islam has permitted polygamy as a solution to social ills and has allowed a certain degree of latitude to human nature, but only within the strictly defined framework of the law. Christian countries make a great show of monogamy, but actually they practice polygamy. No one is unaware of the part mistresses play in Western society. In this respect, Islam is fundamentally honest religion, and permits a Muslim to marry a second wife if he must. But strictly forbids all clandestine amatory associations in order to safeguard the moral probity of the community. It is of interest to note that many, non-Muslim as well as Muslim, countries in the world today have outlawed polygamy. Taking a second wife, even with the free consent of the first wife, is a violation of the law. On the other hand, cheating on the wife, without her knowledge or consent, is perfectly legitimate as far as the law is concerned. What is the legal wisdom behind such a contradiction? Is the law designed to reward deception and punish honesty? It is one of the unfathomable paradoxes of our modern civilized world. To veil, head cover. The status of women in Islam is often the target of attacks in the secular media. The veil or head cover, hijab, is cited by many as an example of the oppression and servitude of women under Islamic law. Let us first study the status of women in societies before the advent of Islam. If you look at history, to ancient civilizations, you will find that women were the oppressed people. Babylonian civilization. The women were degraded and were denied all rights under the Babylonian law. Nowhere in the New Testament is there any explicit commandment that marriage should. The Babylonian law. If a man murdered a woman, instead of him being punished, his wife was put to death. Greek civilization. Greek civilization is considered the most glorious of all ancient civilizations. Under this very glorious system, women were deprived of all rights and were looked down upon. In Greek mythology, an imaginary woman called Pandora is the root cause of misfortune of human beings. The Greeks considered women to be subhuman and inferior to men. Though chastity of women was precious, and women were held in high esteem, the Greeks were later overwhelmed by ego and sexual perversions. Prostitution became a regular practice amongst all classes of Greek society. Roman civilization. When Roman civilization was at the zenith of its glory, a man even had the right to take the life of his wife. Prostitution and nudity were common amongst the Romans. Egyptian civilization. The Egyptian considered women evil and as a sign of a devil. Pre-Islamic Arabia. Before Islam spread in Arabia, the Arabs looked down upon women, and very often when a female child was born, she was buried alive. Now let us see the veil status in religions before Islam. According to Rabbi Dr. Menahem M. Breyer, professor of biblical literature at Yeshiva University, in his book, The Jewish Woman in Rabbinic Literature, it was the custom of Jewish women to go out in public with a head covering which, sometimes, even covered the whole face, leaving one eye free. He quotes some famous ancient rabbis saying, "It is not like the daughters of Israel to walk out with heads uncovered, and cursed be the man who lets the hair of his wife be seen. A woman who exposes her hair for self-adornment brings poverty." Jewish women in Europe continued to wear veils until the 19th century, when their lives became more intermingled with the surrounding secular culture. According to the Christian traditions, it is well known that Catholic nuns have been covering their heads for hundreds of years, but that is not all. St. Paul in the New Testament made some very interesting statements about the veil. "Now I want you to realize that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. And every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. It is just as though her head were shaved. If a woman does not cover her head, she should have her hair cut off, and if it is a disgrace for a woman to have her hair cut off or shaved off, she should cover her head. A man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but the woman is the glory of man. For man did not come from woman, but woman from man, neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. For this reason, and because of the angels, the woman ought to have a sign of authority on her head." I Corinthians 11:3-10. Therefore, veil is one of the Islamic virtues like in Christianity. Proof of this is that the Christian nuns still wear the head cover up to the present days. From what we stated above, we can say that Islam did not invent the head cover. The Quran urges the believing men and women to lower their gaze and guard their modesty, and then urges the believing women to extend their head covers to cover the neck and the bosom. Say to the believing men that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty. And say to the believing women that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty. That they should not display their beauty and ornaments except what ordinarily appear thereof, that they should draw their veils over their bosoms. 24:30-31. The Quran is quite clear that the veil is essential for modesty, but why is modesty important? The Quran is still clear. "O Prophet, tell your wives and daughters and the believing women that they should cast their outer garments over their bodies, when abroad, so that they should be known and not molested." 33:59. This is the whole point. Modesty is prescribed to protect women from molestation, or simply, modesty is protection. 3. Female inheritance. Among the pagan Arabs before Islam, inheritance rights were confined exclusively to female relatives. The Quran abolished all these unjust customs and gave all the female relatives inheritance shares. From what is left by parents and those nearest related, there is a share for men and a share for women, whether the property be small or large, a determinate share, 4-7. Muslim mothers, wives, daughters, and sisters had received inheritance rights 1300 years before Europe recognized that these rights even existed. The division of inheritance is a vast subject with an enormous amount of details. 4-71,112,176. In most of the cases, a woman inherits half of what her male counterpart inherits. However, this is not always the case. In case the deceased has left no ascendant or descendant but has left the uterine brother and sister, each of the two inherit 1/6. If the deceased has left children, both the parents, that is mother and father, get an equal share and inherit 1/6 each. In certain cases, a woman can also inherit a share that is double that of the male. If the deceased is a woman who has left no children, brothers or sisters, and is survived only by her husband, mother and father, the husband inherits half the property while the mother inherits 1/3 and the father the remaining 1/6. In this particular case, the mother inherits a share that is double that of the father. As we mentioned above, that as a general rule, in most cases, the female inherits a share that is half that of the male. In order to understand the rationale behind this rule, let us take this example first. If someone asked me to do 4 responsibilities for a specific amount of money, each responsibility takes 1 hour, that means I have to work 4 hours. If the same person asked my female mate to do 1 responsibility for the same amount of money which takes 1 hour, for sure I would feel injustice, since I work 3 hours more yet with the same amount of money. The same matter can be drawn to the Islamic law of inheritance. In Islam, a woman has no financial obligation and the economical responsibility lies on the shoulders of the man. Before a woman is married, it is the duty of the father or brother to look after the lodging, boarding, clothing and other financial requirements of the woman. After she is married, it is the duty of the husband or the son. Islam holds the man financially responsible for fulfilling the needs of his family. The son also has to spend on his mother and father if there was no source of income for them, and sisters if she does not have a breadwinner. In order to be able to fulfill the responsibility, the man get double the share of the inheritance. 4 females witness. It is not true that 2 female witnesses are always considered as equal to only 1 male witness. It is true only in certain cases. There are about 5 verses in the Quran that mention witnesses, without specifying male or female. There is only 1 verse in the Quran that says 2 female witnesses are equal to 1 male witness. This is the longest verse in the Quran and deals with financial transactions. It says, "O ye who believe, when ye deal with each other, in transactions involving future obligation in a fixed period of time, reduce them to writing and get 2 witnesses out of your own men, and if there are not 2 men, then a man and 2 women, such as ye choose, for witnesses, so that iPhone of them is the other can remind her." 2-282. This verse of the Quran deals only with financial transactions. In such cases, it is advised to make an agreement in writing between the parties and take 2 witnesses, preferably both of which should be men only. In case you cannot find 2 men, then 1 man and 2 women would suffice. For instance, suppose a person wants to undergo an operation for a particular ailment. To confirm the treatment, he would prefer taking references from 2 qualified surgeons. In case he is unable to find 2 surgeons, his second option would be 1 surgeon and 2 general practitioners who are plain MBBS doctors. Similarly, in financial transactions, 2 men are preferred. Islam expects men to be the breadwinners of their families. Since financial responsibility is shouldered by men, they are expected to be well versed in financial transactions as compared to women. Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, the wife of the beloved Prophet, has narrated no less than 2,220 ahadith which are considered authentic only on her solitary evidence. This is sufficient proof that 1 witness of a woman can also be accepted. Many jurists agree that even 1 witness of a woman is sufficient for the sighting of the crescent of the moon. Imagine 1 woman witness is sufficient for one of the pillars of Islam, i.e. fasting, and the whole Muslim community of men and women agree and accept her witness. Some jurists say that 1 witness is required at the beginning of Ramadan and 2 witnesses at the end of Ramadan. It makes no difference whether the witnesses are men or women. Some incidents require only female witness and that of a male cannot be accepted. For instance, in dealing with the problems of women, while giving the burial bath to a woman, the witness has to be a woman. The seeming inequality of male and female witnesses in financial transactions is not due to any inequality of the sexes in Islam. It is only due to the different natures and roles of men and women in society as envisaged by Islam. 5. Women education. Some people claim that Islam does not encourage women to be educated and that it prefers women to be ignorant or close to it. This is a biased, unfounded allegation against Islam. Indeed, there is no religion or doctrine on earth that encourages human to seek knowledge as much as Islam. Islam strongly encourages humans, both men and women, to acquire knowledge in all fields of life, as well as to research and reach the facts. Islam is very keen on teaching woman all that makes her an element of goodness and reform in a secure, happy Islamic society that develops towards perfection and advances towards power and glory. A look at the reality of life shows us how important it is for a woman to be upright, knowledgeable, and well-mannered, for the sake of her family and then for the good of the entire society. The extent of a woman's uprightness or corruption within her family determines the extent of the uprightness or corruption of her children. The Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, would dedicate specific days for women together, in addition to the days when they would attend with men, so that he would be able to teach them the divine knowledge which Allah the Almighty taught and are related to women only, particularly due to their physical and psychological formation. They had the courage to request that from the Prophet, a request that he responded positively to. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, may Allah be pleased with him, said, a woman came to the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, O Messenger of Allah, the men get all your speech. So devote to us a day on which we may come to you so that you would teach us of what Allah has taught you. The Prophet said, gather on such and such a day. They gathered and the Prophet came to them and taught them of what Allah had taught him. He then said, "No woman of you gives 3 children, i.e., loses them to death except that they will screen her from the fire." A woman said, "O Messenger of Allah, and 2 of her children?" The Prophet replied, "And 2. Al-Bukhari and Muslim." This was a woman from the companions who politely and courageously went to the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, and confidently addressed him, saying, "Men, get all your speech, so devote to us a day on which we may come to you so that you would teach us of what Allah the Almighty has taught you." The men obtained their share of knowing things that are specific to them because they could easily and directly speak to the Prophet. They were also bold enough to ask about every matter in their religion. They could ask the Prophet at any time, whereas women could not always ask about the religious rulings that were specific to women nor the solutions to their problems. Even if they could attend the sessions of the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, without intermixing with men, they might have felt too shy to ask about their specific matters in the presence of men. Therefore, teaching them the rulings that were specific to them and solving their problems entailed dedicating special sessions for them to discuss their issues and give them the rulings and provide them with the teachings in accordance with their psychological, intellectual, moral, and social characteristics, as well as in accordance with their responsibility in their life inside and outside their families. For all these reasons, this woman demanded that a specific time be allocated for women to be taught the matters of religion that were specific to them, and for thesamy reasons the Prophet accepted and answered her demand.